Well, for the first time, the Food and Drug Administration is proposing regulating e-cigarettes. The agency says that will allow it to oversee the industry the same way as traditional cigarettes. Al Jazeera's Tom Ackerman explains what these regulations will mean for some increasingly popular devices.
It's taken 5 years for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to exercise its authority to regulate electronic cigarettes. It's now a $2 billion industry, with U.S. sales doubling by the year. Big tobacco companies are leading the way, offering new products with advertising pitches like this.
I get to have a blue without the guilt because there's only vapor, not tobacco smoke. That means no ash, no odor.
The proposed regulations would require ingredients to be registered and listed, limit claims of reduced risk to those based on scientific evidence, include health warnings, and ban vending machine sales unless they're located where underage youth are barred. The FDA, though, is stopping short of restricting online sales, TV ads, or fruit flavorings, which, according to some critics, are particularly targeted at younger users. At this newly opened vapor store in Washington, which already restricts its customers to ages 18 and up, manager Ryan Bixby says the regulations are welcome.
There's a lot of companies that are making products that may or may not be reputable. It is up to the vendor at this point to do the research, to find the companies that are putting out solid products that are reliable, that are made properly.
Promoters of e-cigarettes say they promise to help reduce the conventional smoking rate in America, which hasn't fallen much below 20% in recent years.
E-cigarettes, I think, will be more likely part of the solution than part of the problem.
But anti-smoking campaigners are skeptical.
Well, the big question about e-cigarettes is, are they going to reduce the number of people who smoke, or are they going to act as a gateway to smoking, especially among kids?
The answer to that question will depend on the final shape of the regulations and research to determine whether e-cigarettes help convert deadly smoking habits into something safer. Tom Ackerman, Al Jazeera, Washington.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, from 2011 to 2012, the percentage of high school students who reported using an e-cigarette more than doubled, from 4.7% to 10%. In February alone, poison control centers logged 215 calls involving e-cigarettes, and 51% of those calls involved children. Michael Erickson is Dean of the School of Public Health at Georgia State University, one of 14 U.S. institutions conducting FDA-funded research on electronic cigarettes. He is also former director of the Office on... Dean Erickson, you certainly have the expertise to speak about this. Are these regulations enough to satisfy public health advocates like yourself?
Well, good morning, Stephanie. Yesterday's announcement from the FDA is really the first step in their regulatory efforts to control and assure that e-cigarettes do good as opposed to doing harm. We expect to see the regulations expanded over time as the science comes in, so the actions that the agency does are a positive force and begins to reduce the leading cause of death in our society, which is traditional cigarettes and the smoke that they generate in order to get nicotine. And that's what this is all about. How can we reduce smoke?
Now, excluded from these new FDA rules were restrictions on whether flavors of e-cigarettes should be banned. The government doesn't regulate flavored vodka, for example. Why should flavored e-cigarettes be banned?
Well, the government does regulate flavored cigarettes. A few years ago, there were R.J. Reynolds sold pina colada cigarettes and other types of flavored cigarettes, and the FDA, in fact, has the authority and has banned flavors in cigarettes, all but menthol, and even that's very controversial at this point. So they have the authority and the ability and have done it for traditional cigarettes, and the question is, should they or will they do it for e-cigarettes as well?
And the reason they want to ban critics flavored e-cigarettes is because of children. Well, the FDA also decided not to regulate the advertising of e-cigarettes. Are we going to see a return of the Marlboro Man and, I remember, the Camel, which critics say clearly market to children?
Unfortunately, the marketing of e-cigarettes has been completely irresponsible. Any of your viewers can go on Google and Google Jenny McCarthy and blue cigarettes and see the types of advertisements that are currently out there, which really hype sex and glamour and sophistication, the same things that cigarette companies did decades ago. There's even one e-cigarette company that their theme is welcome back, implying that they want ex-smokers to come back into the nicotine franchise, which is of great concern to me and to other public health experts.
Let's talk about the public health issue. What do we know science-wise with regards to these e-cigarettes? I mean, you have said that they're not as bad as cigarettes, but could they be harmful in other ways to public health?
Well, that's the real crux of this matter, is that it's clear, and I think everyone agrees, that if a smoker were to smoke an e-cigarette rather than a traditional cigarette, it would be a benefit to them, because it's the smoke that kills, and e-cigarettes don't have smoke, just nicotine. But the FDA has to look at this from a population standpoint, not just for an individual. They have to look at what proportion of kids will start using nicotine that otherwise wouldn't, and they may become traditional smokers. And also, we've seen that many of the people who use e-cigarettes continue to smoke traditional cigarettes and use e-cigarettes when they can't smoke normally. So they may actually be getting more nicotine and not reducing their smoking at all. These are the types of questions that the FDA needs to answer to begin to intelligently regulate e-cigarettes in a way that will advance the public health.
If nicotine isn't dangerous, why are poison control centers getting so many calls on these devices?
Well, I think it's important to understand that it's not nicotine isn't dangerous, it's just that nicotine isn't as dangerous as smoke. Nicotine is a cardiovascular stimulant. Pregnant women can't be prescribed nicotine replacement therapy because it's harmful to the unborn child. Nicotine in higher doses is a pesticide or a rat poison. So nicotine is not a benign substance, it's just not as bad as smoke. And to think that, you know, millions of Americans and around the world are inhaling vaporized nicotine into their lungs thinking that it's safe is not the right idea. That's not the case. It's just better than smoking.
Michael Erickson, Dean of the School of Public Health at Georgia State University in Atlanta this morning. Dean Erickson, thanks for your insights.